Hello and welcome to the home of the Ghost Owl, and here we are with another series. This time it's focused on Warhammer the Old World. So for those that aren't aware, Warhammer the Old World is a return to the original lore and world of Warhammer Fantasy Battle before Age of Sigmar, and with it brings essentially a new game for the tabletop, but is a return to the style of Warhammer Fantasy Battle with rank and file. Now, this has been announced as being in creation right now with Games Workshop. There is currently no release date, but it certainly is expected either by the end of 2023 or the first half of 2024. So in reality, not that far away. Now, in terms of what this series is looking at, it's looking at those models that are currently available to buy that could well be expected to be part of the army books and army lists that will be used in Warhammer the Old World. Now, we do know there are new models coming, and we'll look at that when we come on to each of the factions. We'll be looking at the factions in alphabetical order, starting with those that are currently in the narrative, and then looking at those that are outside of the narrative, though we do know there are at least rules coming for every faction when the game is first released. Now, why am I doing this? Well, for people like me who are old Warhammer Fantasy Battle players that probably still have existing armies, maybe gathering dust somewhere, who haven't been keeping up to date with what's available on the web store, it's a look at what you could still buy to flesh out the armies that you already own. If you're new to Warhammer Fantasy Battle, then it's a look at, if you were going to start an army, what an army might look like, what the models might look like, and give you a chance to maybe dip in early. If you're like me, I'm a very slow painter, so this gives me a chance to buy models in advance of the game being released and have them painted and ready to play when the game does fully release. And as well, not many people are sat there with, £300, £400, £500. We don't know how big the armies are going to be to drop on an army on day one. So this does allow you to then spread the costs over buying the units over many, many months. And sort of you can buy a unit, paint it up, and next month buy a unit, and you're not having to find the money all in one go. Now, I should say everything that is in this series are personal opinions only. I have no inside knowledge. I have no relationship with Games Workshop in that way, other than being a fan of Warhammer Fantasy Battle and the lore of that game. And everything in the series is correct at the time of recording only. And I have based a lot of what I'm going to talk about on the last remaining army book that was published for the factions. Many of those will be 8th edition, but there are a few like Chaos Dwarfs and Bretonnia that didn't have 8th edition army books. Now, before we get into it, other miniatures are available. You can find, obviously, the old classic miniatures that are no longer available to buy from Games Workshop on eBay, for example. You've got other manufacturers that you can use as counts as, such as DS Vault with their sort of Crusaders and Templars and so on. Kings of War. There's also those 3D printer opportunities out there, whether you own a 3D printer and you're looking for the files, or whether you're looking for someone to do it for you. That's an option, but always remember that non-official Games Workshop models are not usually allowed to be used in their stores, at gaming tables, or in the tournaments. Also, when you're looking at the Games Workshop models on their website, check the bases. Some of these will have round bases, some of them will have square. Now, we know that they're going to be square bases, but we also know there's going to be some base size changes, so please keep that in mind when you're buying the models. And again, if a lot of times the bases you don't really care if you're just playing at home or playing in a local club, but if you are playing in tournament, you will need obviously the correct base sizes. But if you're not too fussed about making sure they're fully correct, then you've obviously, consider the fact that when you're playing a rank and file game like Warhammer Fantasy Battle was, and like the old world will be, movement trays will be a really important part. So you can mitigate a lot of the base issues with movement trays. Also, check the material. Some people really don't like Finecast, so there's still quite a lot of the old models that are dotted around that may well be Finecast, so check that out versus plastic. And if you are looking at stuff off eBay or whatever, and it's Forge World, that of course will be resin, so for example the Chaos Dwarves. And overall, given what we know about Warhammer the Old World, the timeline it's going to be set in, I would avoid buying named characters unless there's a nostalgia thing. There will surely be rules, even if Games Workshop doesn't do it. The fan base will provide rules for some of those characters that you might have played in the past. You can consider the timeline and maybe take a gamble on, if you look at some of the longer lived characters, whether they be demons or whatever, even elves, for example, maybe those characters will make an appearance. But with a new game, with a new timeline, I can certainly expect that we might see a few new named characters put in. Though, of course, as always, you can use these named characters as accounts as. So if you had Karl Franz, the Emperor of the Empire, for example, on his Griffin, there's no reason you couldn't use him as a general on Griffin if that option was available. So that is essentially the intro of why we're doing it and some of the considerations that you need to consider while we go through each of these videos. But without further ado, let's go and look at the next faction. So the next faction up is the Orc and Goblin tribes, and again focusing on those 8th edition army lists, which would have been, in this case, from the 8th edition army book. We can see they had a bunch of special lords. As with other factions, I do not recommend going after the special lords unless it is, as I said, for nostalgia purposes or for some player written rules, or if you're going to use it as accounts as. There's only one still available, however, which is Wurzag the Great Green Prophet. He's currently known as Wurgog Prophet for £18. There's no reason why you couldn't use him as a Savage Orc Shaman. So as we move on to the generic lords, well, it's a bit of a mix. You've got Orc War Bosses, Savage Orc and Black Orc War Bosses. They're all gone. The Night Goblin War Boss is gone, as is the Goblin Great Shaman and Night Goblin Great Shaman. Though there may be some Age of Sigmar things in there that you could use as accounts as, possibly. But what is available is the Goblin War Boss, who's known as a Scuttle Boss on Gigantic Spider. He would be available, and that's the picture you see at the bottom. And then you've also got Orc Great Shaman or Savage Orc Great Shaman, which is known as a Maniac Weird Knob. However, that does currently come mounted on a War Boar at £21. You can see that picture in the middle of the screen there. And as said previously, Wurgog Prophet, who is also Wurzag, you can use him easily as accounts as Savage Orc Great Shaman, so he would be an option on foot at £18. So it's still a few lords there, but in terms of your generic Orc, Black Orc, Savage Orc war bosses, not currently available. Special heroes, Gatilla the Hunter and Snagler Gobspit, named heroes, not currently available. But in terms of heroes, you've got the Orcs, again, missing their big bosses, the Night Goblin big boss, and also the Savage Orc Shaman, Goblin Shaman missing. However, there is the option of the Savage Orc big boss, which is one of my favourite of the Orc sculpts. I really do like this model. You can see it there in the centre of the screen. It's a fantastic sculpt, and that's the kind of model that I'd pick up anyway, just to have the model and paint the model. So definitely one to consider picking up. The other options, you've got the Goblin Big Boss, so that is the same Scuttle Boss on Gigantic Spider. You could easily use him as a Big Boss or a War Boss. You've got a Orc Shaman there, known as a War Doc, for £12 on the website. And there's also a potential for a Night Goblin Shaman known as a Madcap Shaman for £13. And you can see his picture at the bottom of the screen. It'll be interesting to see, are we going to have the split with Orcs, Savage Orc, Black Orcs in there? I can't see it being another way. I definitely see having the three there. I definitely see us having Forest Goblins, Night Goblins, and so on. They would certainly be synonymous with Orcs and Goblins in general. So I definitely think these would be absolutely viable. The gigantic spider as a mount, it will be interesting to see if that's in. However, if the model's available, you kind of expect Games Workshop to put it in to try and shift some of the kits. In terms of the Orc and Goblin tribes, they've got a few of their core units available. Again, the basic Orcs not, but you do have Savage Orcs, known as Savage Orcs. 20 for £37.50. You see them on the left-hand side there. The basic Goblins and Goblin Wolf Riders not available, but Night Goblins are known as Shooters or Stabbers on the website. Shooters with the bows, Stabbers with the spears, and that's 20 for £27.50, so pretty good value there. And then you've also got Forest Goblin Spider Riders, known as Grot Spider Riders, 10 for £24. And then you can't mention Night Goblins without the Night Goblin Fanatics. And essentially you've got some pretty new models there with the Loon Smasher Fanatics, 5 for £27.50. Absolutely viable to use as Fanatics for a Night Goblin army. And again, not horrendously expensive. So lots of options here for the Orc and Goblin tribes as we go through, both in terms of core and lords so far. Let's have a look next at the special units. So, continuing the theme of difficult to find Orcs, Black Orcs, Orc Boar Boys, the Chariot, and the Standard Goblins not available, nor are the Snotlings or Trolls. However, you still can get Savage Orc Boar Boys, 10 for £37.50. That's the top picture in the middle. There's the Night Goblin Squig Hoppers, still currently available, just known as Squig Hoppers, 10 for £35. That's the bottom picture. And then you've got the Night Goblin Squig Herd at £32.50, and you can see that in the middle picture there. Again, I can absolutely see all these units making their way into an army list. What is a Goblin army list without Squigs? And then finally, on to the rare units. So the Artillery and the Snotling Pump Wagon, not currently available. But the more monstrous units are the Arachnarok Spider. I can absolutely see that making the list. That's in there at £40. You've got the Mangler Squigs. That's a very nice looking model. And that's one of the things with Age of Sigmar. I could never get into the rules, but some of the models have come out have been absolutely fantastic. You've got the Mangler Squigs in there at 55. You've got Stone Trolls known as Rock Gut Trogus. That's 3 for £37.50. That's on the top left. And then you've got the River Trolls, which are known as Fellwater Trogus. 3 for £32.50. That's on the bottom left. And then under the Gargants sort of section, you have the Giant, and there's a whole bunch of different selection of Giants. I've just picked one, which is the Ale Guzzler Gargant, £42.50. So, there is the Giant in that as well. Whether the Giant will be actually in the Orc and Goblin army list, I'm not sure. But again, it was kind of an iconic unit with the Greenskins, despite how they've now ended up with Age of Sigmar. So I could absolutely see it making that list. And that has brought us to the end of the Orc and Goblin tribes. They have plenty of units still available on the website, though do take note that quite a few of the names have changed. And again, as always, make sure you check those bases and how you want to approach it. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. And if you didn't, give it a thumbs down and let me know why in the comments down below. And as always, if you want to see more content, then please hit that subscribe button. It's totally free for you to do, and it means a lot for me. So thank you very much for that in advance. You've been watching The Ghost Owl, and I will see you very soon.